If there are questions that are obviously all joined together, then they will answer the questions and then I'll move on to the next subject. All the questions are being acknowledged and are being recorded, and we will obviously afterwards be in a position to see that we've answered all the questions as possible. If you fail to get a question, Joanna will explain about how you can make questions after this event. So, Joanna, can you explain to the delegates in relation to how they can ask the questions for those who don't know it?
Good afternoon, members. So at the bottom of your screen, you will see a box which says Q&A with 2 speech bubbles. If you click on that, that will open up and you'll see there is already a number of questions. To be able to submit a question, you will type it into the Q&A box and then click send. We'll obviously be answering as many questions as possible and the themes will be grouped. We'll try to answer all of the questions live and you'll see a notification in the Q&A window that will say there's answered, so you'll see there's already one been answered. If there are any questions that we don't get a chance to answer, obviously we will be providing both the recorded link and the questions in a Q&A after the session, and I'll provide that to your Democratic Service colleagues or the Essex colleagues from myself. There is a way that you can show your support to a question instead of repeating a question, and that is to use the thumbs up. And I can see that a number of you have already been doing that. So to do that, you click the thumb over any of the question and it will bring it up. So we will try and answer those with more thumbs. So I can see a number of you are putting your thumbs up now. Hopefully that's okay, members.
Now, I know our leader, Councillor David Finch, was hoping to be able to join us. Has David joined us, Dick?
Not at the moment.
Right, so let me formally welcome you on behalf of the County Council to this session. If you wonder why I keep asking Dick things, some of you may not know that I've been blind for 30 years, so I'm not very good, and Michael puts up the slide shortly and I won't see them out, but no sweat. So I want to explain what happened. Clearly, since lockdown eased, we've been moving along through summer, preparing things, trying to do our recovery programs and social care, and with our health colleagues to deal with all those conditions that hadn't been dealt with. Mike had warned us that as schools went back and winter approached, he expected COVID conditions to increase. And a few weeks ago, Essex was at an average of 10 to 15 cases per 100,000 across the county. We began to see those numbers increase. I'll leave Mike to show you the detail of that. But last Wednesday, Mike came to me and said, I have to officially tell you, John, that you now have exponential increase in numbers across the county, across the rate of infection across the county, and I need to urge you to take action. I share with you all, I took some convincing from Mike. That was the last thing I really wanted to do. Everybody wants to get back to living as close as they can to a normal life. We were well below the national average, and we did not want to alarm people and cause them to lose confidence. However, when Mike showed me the evidence that he is going to show you, I was convinced. I went next to my cabinet colleagues in Essex County Council, and they started in a similar position of scepticism, and they were convinced. Last Friday, we had meetings with every council leader and with MPs, and every council leader by the end of the day was convinced. I spoke with the Secretary of State last Friday to see how he would feel about us being the first county to proactively go to government, and he warmly welcomed it, believing it to be much better for people to be in their own destiny and shape their own destiny than have it done to them by government. We met the opposition party leaders in Essex County Council on Monday, and they were convinced. So we had all party support in Essex County Council and all council support from across the county, and they are councils led by all the different political colours. I believe that to be critical, because I have always said what we must never have is infighting between the political leadership of Essex because that will only undermine the confidence the public have in us, and it will further erode any compliance with various rules. Mike will talk you through the evidence base. I just want to make 2 points. Firstly, that this is not just about putting us into higher rate risk and leaving us there. This is about a 3-pronged approach. Underpinning the entry into high-level risk, we will be further enhancing our track and trace operation, and this is already among the best in the country. I've given Mike the challenge of making it into the very best in the country and doing what we can to get to rates that aren't being achieved elsewhere. Secondly, it will be about more visible enforcement. We've had meetings with the Chief Constable and Police, Fire and Crime Commissioner. They are committed to working with us very clearly to move into a place where enforcement is much more visible. That shops and pubs and restaurants and workplaces can expect to receive regular visits where we will seek to educate and guide and coach, but ultimately will enforce if that is what is required. We were the first county to send out directives earlier in the original lockdown, earlier since lockdown was eased. And thirdly and fundamentally, this is about changing people's behaviour. I don't blame people for the fact that they have slipped from the disciplines of earlier this year in full lockdown. I'm as sick of it as anybody else. But actually, unless we get back to those disciplines, social distancing, 2 meters is always best. Wearing our masks when we can't, washing our hands like we've never washed them before, and sanitising everywhere. And the discipline of isolating if we're asked to by the app or whatever. Unless we get back to those disciplines, we will not achieve the change that Mike is going to outline to you now. There are, of course, the restrictions we're bringing in. They are relatively modest, actually. Painful. I'm a dad and granddad. I'd like to see my grandchildren too. But they are, in comparison, modest to what the very high-level risk situations in Liverpool look like. And I think the only other thing I'd share with you, I kept being asked in the media yesterday, was I pleased that the government had made this decision to support our application? Pleased would never be the word for this. I have the deepest empathy with all the people who are writing to us, complaining that they're going to be locked away from those that they love, are unable to do the things they want. Those worried about mental illness. Those who just believe that we're off our rocker, as some have said, and some have been quite abusive. I have every empathy with them. It's the most difficult political decision I've had to make. But when you see the case numbers that Mike is going to describe, when you see the hospital admissions soaring, and I went to a meeting this Wednesday where I was told by the hospitals in Southend, Basildon and Chelmsford, that if there was not any more COVID, they would still take till the end of March to catch up with their current backlogs. And every case of COVID adds to the pressure on their backlogs for dealing with cancer patients. And that's true of many other conditions. And when you see a rising death rate, I just feel you have an obligation to do what you believe to be right. And that is what we're doing. Mike, I'd like you please to take us through your presentation. Now, Mike is quite notorious for handling these slides, but they're usually great when they get going. Mike, over to you, please.
Is this happening?
Can you see
are you seeing the slides, anybody?
Yep, yes. Mike, if you just put it onto slideshow.
No, I need to do that. Well, how do I do it? Because no, I can't see you if I do that, can I? Let me see.
So if you go to slideshow, everybody will see your screen. Yep, we're there now.
Okay, thank you. Oops. So it's sort of got a mind of its own suddenly. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me this afternoon. I really need your help. Before I was here, I was doing a similar sort of presentation, question and answers to secondary head teachers. And I think the issue here is that they believe Essex have gone out on a limb. Essex have decided they're not going to wait for the government to say you've hit the level, hit the criteria for going into a different alert level. You've done it yourself for some reason. So we need to really get the messaging right here, because what's critical, as you'll hear as I go through the presentation, is that it's absolutely essential that people adhere to and comply with and work with the proposals within this. If we're to be successful, because the margins are tight in order to turn this thing round. We can do a lot of good, but we can actually turn it around completely in good order if we have the opportunity to sort of get people behind us on this, and that is really, really the critical factor. So why did I need to do this? And this is actually not what I brought to Councillor Spence last week, because it's been updated with another week's data since then. But basically what you can see is there is a steep rise in cases in almost all areas in Essex over recent weeks. There are some ups and downs, so Brentwood showing a bit of an up and a down, but generally speaking, the trend is quite clearly upwards. Now, if you look back into August, you can see in most of the areas, they're sort of bumping along, maybe going up a little bit, but suddenly, as we get into September, the increases start to be quite marked. And we're now in a phase that's called exponential. So instead of the growth being 10, 20, 30 per week, it's now doubling. It's doubling. And the doubling time is probably somewhere over 7 days, but certainly not as long as 10 days, and varies from place to place across Essex. But generally, every area is showing these marked increases. You can see areas like Malden, which we generally consider to be low, it remains low, but it's gone up an awful lot, and Tendring similarly. So I'm afraid what we're seeing here is very rapid growth. This shows the increase in rates on the 10th of October and the 1st of October. And you can see that in many areas between the 7th the 1st and the 10th, there was kind of a doubling and even tripling of cases. If you look at Braintree, it tripled. At Tendring, it went up enormously. Similarly, Chelmsford, Colchester, basically quadrupled in that time. So we are seeing a definite increase in cases. Now, if you look at the cases we're seeing now as of the 14th, they vary between 47, 75, 75, few in the 60s, 50s. What I want to show you now, this is the national position for 1 month ago. So if you look a month ago, the worst place was Bolton, which was 121. It's the third column you look at, the incidence per 100,000. So there were a number of areas in Essex that would have been second to Bolton in terms of their need for intervention at that time. All areas in Essex would be on the government's intervention list had it happened a month ago. So the government had moved the goalposts rather than us. And you'll note that every single Essex area, except for one, has a higher rate now than Manchester did a month ago, and all have a higher rate than Bury did a month ago, or Leicester did a month ago. So I believe strongly that if we leave this alone, within 2 or 3 weeks, we'll be at such a level that the Secretary of State says you need to go into the high alert level. And the question is whether or not there's any merit to going into that high alert level sooner than the Secretary of State says. And that is the key to what we're trying to do here. This shows again that this is not just about increased numbers of tests. It's the box table I want people to look at. The numbers of tests have gone up a little bit, really haven't gone up much at all since the end of August. The positivity rate since the end of August has gone from 1.36 to 6.52. The reason the numbers for the 5th are lower is because it isn't a complete week. It takes a few days for the numbers to come in. But so we're doing roughly the same, maybe a few more tests, but the numbers that are positive, those tests have gone up by fivefold since the end of August, and really tenfold since the beginning of August. This shows the population age groups at the moment that are impacted. The wiggly grey line is what we saw in the first wave. The reason the first wave is very different is that basically the only people who were tested there were people who were in hospital. So this vast group of people, younger people in the community who are now seen now as positive, were very likely to have been positive, high numbers in that group in the first tier as well, but that wasn't detected because we weren't testing. Sadly, what we're seeing now, though, is an increase in the numbers in the older groups as well. So while the increases started in the younger groups, particularly the 15 to sort of 35-year-olds, it is now spreading into older, more vulnerable groups. That spread to older, more vulnerable groups has been reflected in the impact on the hospital. So this is the bed occupancy in hospitals over the last month or so across the whole of Essex. So generally in September, there were no beds occupied, or one or two beds, one bed maybe occupied per day from COVID cases. When I brought this to Councillor Spence last week, there was 45 beds in Essex, and now there's, as of last night, there was 87. I haven't had this morning's figures yet. So basically, again, we've seen a doubling of the number of beds occupied by coronavirus in Essex in a week. And we've seen a very steep increase since the beginning of September, where there were basically no cases. And that curve, as you can see, seems to be getting steeper and steeper. If one looks at what's happened nationally, in east of England, you can see, which is the top box, you can see that the cases are fairly low. You can see in the northeast and the northwest that the cases are high, with in the northwest 1,000 beds in the area occupied by COVID cases. If you then impose what's happening east of England onto the northwest, you can see that we're probably about 3 or 4 weeks behind where they are. So one might expect in Essex that level of occupancy of beds if we carry on as we are within 3 or 4 weeks. Similarly, we're starting now to see deaths in hospital. Not many, but we've seen 14 COVID deaths in hospital in the last couple of weeks, following a period where we basically for a month saw none whatsoever. So sadly, all the signs to me are pointing to a rapidly increasing, very serious problem with a doubling and a doubling and a doubling and a doubling going on. I have to think, is the best thing for us to do to sit and wait, or is the best thing for us to do to act now, to do the best we can to try and reverse it? So this looks at what we've been doing currently in Essex. I don't want to dwell too long on this, but we have an effective system in Essex. It's not by regional colleagues. It's supposed to be very good from regional colleagues. In fact, when we had our test and trace service actually had to help Norfolk when they had the poultry outbreaks because they couldn't cope. With the district and borough city EHOs have been brilliant, really stepping up on this, working with businesses, helping in enforcement, helping in developing COVID secure premises and workplaces. And we've been quite quick to use the new coronavirus action powers. However, I believe what we're seeing, we have exhausted all the possibilities to control case growth using the available means to us. So what can we do? Well, action is needed. And very recently, we've now had sight of the SAGE modelling that underlines this. And short of a full lockdown, and we will not want a full lockdown at the moment, short of a full lockdown, the most impactful interventions that can be offered are to get people to work from home as much as possible and to reduce households meeting. So by moving to the higher alert level, we're in a place where we can start looking at these particular issues. So working from home, the SAGE believe with some confidence that by getting everyone who can work from home where possible. So not everybody working from home, people who have to go to work will have to go to work. We can reduce the R value by between 0.2 and 0.4. And by preventing households meeting, we can reduce the R value by a further 0.1 to 0.2. The current R value in Essex, we believe, is 1.7 based on the increases we're seeing to date. Some people are working from home already. So if you make an assumption of the lowest level in terms of the impact of increasing working from home, so just assume it's 0.2 and take a middle position from the reducing household meeting. And that really is the most impactful bit of moving to alert level 2. There's very little else in it other than reducing the households meeting. Those two things together can bring the R value in Essex down to 0.92. We can then apply that to different times of moving in. So if we waited for the middle of November before the Secretary of State might say, yes, you can go into it, we'd be following that very steep blue curve. Where we'd see many thousands of cases, and it would take us an awful long time to come out of it, and the cases would still be increasing well into the new year. If we go with a few weeks earlier than that, we can reduce that curve quicker. If we go now, which is the orange curve, assuming we go on the 19th, there's every chance we can depart from this curve quite quickly. We can turn this around in good time. We can reduce the hospital admissions required. We can reduce the deaths that will happen. And most importantly, perhaps we can reduce the pressure on the people we serve, their mental health, their businesses, and their livelihoods by coming out of this quite quickly. Because as you can see, the orange curve turns around in a time where some of the other curves are still going up. Now, how do we know when we're coming out of it? So we will have to plot cases against these curves. And when they start to come down, we can take a view. And I think the key measure is probably going to be hospital admissions. When we start to be convinced that hospital admissions, hospital beds are on their way down from coronavirus, then I would have no hesitation in going straight up to the Secretary of State and saying, right, we've done the job, let's move out of this now. But really big buts. It absolutely depends on the people of Essex stepping forward. This is doable, but it's only doable if we can capture the hearts and minds of those we serve. People will have to work from home if they possibly can. People will have to suck it up and not mix in households. And that affects all of you, it affects me. People can otherwise go to work, can go to school. The main hit is on that social issue, that mixing of households. And really, we need people to step up on that. And our main challenge, the huge challenge we're facing at the moment is, how do we bring the people of Essex with us? How do we make this happen for real? I think that's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Take over to you for question time.
Okay, thank you very much. The first one, John, is for you. Councillor Butland, and there are 20 other members who endorsed this question. So, hang on a minute. Just bear with me. So the most common question from Braintree residents members is, how will we judge when Tier 2 can finish? Is it our decision or the government?
Absolutely, Graham. It is the Secretary of State's decision, as it was, to accept our recommendation to go in. Like I said, is that it will be based on hospital bed occupied. It will be the clear evidence the government are looking for, because that tells them that the NHS protection piece is working. It tells them that the most serious case volumes are coming down. Let's have a lag number, and it will be reviewed. This will be reviewed in a 4-weekly cycle. So I doubt very much if we can do this in 4 weeks. If we could do it in 8, we would be making the recommendation to the Secretary of State in December. And I can't promise that we're going to get this sorted out for Christmas, but this gives us a far better chance than if we wait to be put in. Well, if we wait to be put in November, you can forget it, really. This gives us the possibility, if everyone, as Mike says, steps up. And the other side that we'll be aiming to demonstrate when we go to the Secretary of State is that test, track and trace is operating at the levels I outlined earlier.
Next question is from Councillor McGurran, and there are 14 other members who have endorsed it. Councillor McGurran asks, we are already getting a lot of flack over the perception Essex has entered tier 2 purely for financial gain. I'm not aware yet of the government pledging any additional funding. Is this still the case? And if funding is announced, what will the comms strategy be?
Some of you may see me get very angry about the 7th of the week. I was accused of giving a very angry video, but I was very angry. And social media started suggesting on Tuesday and Wednesday that we had done this purely for money. If anyone wants to do a freedom of information request of any conversation in which I or my cabinet colleagues have been involved, at no point, and Dick, you can confirm this as an ex-copper, we all believe you, at no time was finance ever mentioned. In fact, I was firmly of the view that we wouldn't get any finance, and if there was going to be any money anywhere, we would have wanted it to support businesses. But I've always been sceptical about that. This is not about money. Now, as it happens, I heard last night that we will get a modest sum of money. I think it works out at about £3 million. That just about cover the cost of some of the work we're doing, including the 700,000 leaflets that are being developed for delivery into houses across Essex over the next 10 days. We're going to print tonight with delivery starting on Monday at about 100,000 a day. Dick, I think you can confirm that at no time was money ever mentioned.
Correct. Correct. Bear with me a minute. The next one is Councillor Pond. Will there be a hotline for councillors to report alleged infractions? Bear with me a minute, it's gone off.
Yeah, so thanks, Chris. And these are great questions, thank you. They really are. Mike, you may want to come in on this, but what we're seeing in the leaflet in the last version I heard, if anybody is in a situation where they see in a shop or a pub or wherever really, bad compliance and bad compliance regimes, they should firstly go to the environmental health department and their local council. I'd like to understand why. Now, I fully appreciate lots of people won't know what that means, and whether we could establish a hotline, Mike, I'm not sure. I'd like to bring this to you. But clearly, I understand the challenge people would feel in directly confronting other people about their behaviour. I'd love to think that where we felt we could, we would, but I know from some of the volunteers in my own division doing things like neighbourhood watch and speed watch and so on, they do find it quite abusive. So Mike, do you think we could do a hotline, or what would you be recommending?
So I think that we do have lines around the test and trace sign, the Essex Welfare Service. We need to think how to do this. It may be that it needs to best go into the police and then be farmed out to the environmental health officers, or vice versa. But I think we can certainly go away and look at a dedicated line for this, which I think would be helpful. But we'd have to get that quite quick to add into the literature we send out.
So we have officers on the call, so can we ask you to pick this up, please, without waiting for the end of the webinar? That's a great question, thank you. Dick?
Councillor Whitehouse asked, and there's some enforcement as well, is the move to tier 2 expected to reverse the trend or simply slow the rate of increase? What are the implications for the length of time we could expect to be in tier 2? I'll pass over to Mike.
Thank you. So my absolute desire here, and the reason that I pressed for this, was to actually go in and out quicker. So the model that I showed you suggests, and that is, I'm not being held to this, because well, I am being held to it, but the actual model, the detail of the model has a number of assumptions in it. But basically what I showed you would mean that we would actually be out of it by Christmas. But I cannot, I mean, there are so many ifs and buts and, quid pro quos in that it's very difficult to be clear. But if people, the evidence shows from NICE that if people work from home wherever they possibly can, if people do not mix as households, and they're the two key things, if people do those things, then there's every chance that we will turn this curve around it, because we've gone fast in good order and come out of it quick. If we waited a longer time, then I think the chances of doing it in any short order would have been lost entirely, and which is why we went early. The very worst that can happen is that it isn't effective, that we continue to go up, but we spend 2 or 3 weeks longer than we otherwise would have done in this particular situation. But I think on balance, the evidence suggests that we can do this together as a county, but we need to get people behind us. And I think that's my main worry and challenge at the moment.
The next one, Joanna, can you wait till I ask the next question before you remove the previous one, because my screen disappears when you're doing it. So just wait till I've asked the next question. So it's on finance, John, and it's coming from a different angle, from Councillor Can. Apologies, Councillor Khan. What level of financial compensation will district councils receive?
I am not aware of any financial compensation available to district councils for this, for going into tier 2. There was some enforcement funds being distributed to district councils earlier. And this is tough, because lots of people are saying to me, what about financial support schemes for pubs and restaurants? And I feel the greatest empathy with them. Some of my friends run restaurants and hotels in the Chelmsford area. And when you built up your business over all these years, and then you see this happening, after the lockdown earlier this year. You are fed up, to put it mildly. I fully get that. To which I say this: outside of pubs and hospitality, with these restrictions, 99% of all businesses in Essex will be able to continue to operate. Even home hairdressers, people going into people's homes, plumbers, electricians, all those people will continue to operate. Gyms, beauty parlours, hairdressers will continue to operate. Shops will continue to operate. If you look at what's happening in the Liverpools of this world, if we get to tier 3 and there is full lockdown, there is no chance that the compensation up there will be sufficient for the losses the businesses cover, even if there are some grants. And the number of businesses closed will be far wider. So I recognise, district councils, that you are feeling, we are too at the county council, and it remains to be seen yet increasing employment will do to council tax collection. I can't hold out any prospect, I'm afraid, that I'm aware of, unless the government or the Chancellor have a change of heart. As far as businesses are concerned, we are thinking about what we can do. We certainly want to make sure they know what support schemes are already available. As things stand, no finance is being made available by government for tier 2 authorities.
So can I just add to that, please, that the other thing to remember, yes, it's going to be really bad for the hospitality industry, but we are heading for this anyway. If it happened in 3 weeks, then the hit to the hospitality industry would be longer and harder, because we'd be likely in this phase for much longer than we will be. So this gives the best chance. It's not going to be good, but it's the best chance of that industry to come out of this intact, because it'll be in that period, hopefully for the shortest possible time.
Okay, bear with me a minute. So it's still with hospitality, but it's about a relevant point from Councillor Ward and others. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of confusion regarding the differences between tiers 1 and 2 as regards to hospitality. Lack of clarity has been top of the complaints list, Mike.
Mike, just as you think about it, I'll just sympathise absolutely, because I can see that from my mailbag. And also say there's an awful lot of confusion, Mike, for you to answer between what we're going into as tier 2 and what we could be going into as tier 3. So can you just spell out what we're going into compared to what we would be going into in tier 3? People keep telling me we're going into lockdown. This is all about, and Mike, you'll agree, I think, this is all about avoiding lockdown. Mike?
Yes. So thank you. So I think tier 1, I think to be honest, is quite ineffective. It allows a lot of mixing between people in the rule of 6. And if you look at the SAGE evidence and advice, there's very little in tier 1 that's going to turn this around, in what they call now the medium that's going to turn this around, except you're expected to work from home. But I suspect that hasn't been pushed enough, particularly from turning around from go back to the offices to work from home. I think we need to do a lot more about that. In terms of the high level, the highlight level where Essex have now found ourselves, the most important intervention, in addition to working from home, is that the household contacts shouldn't mix, because that will reduce by 40% the transmission of this disease, and can, as we said, reduce the R value by between 0.1 and 0.2. In addition to that, there are actually very few restrictions. There are some, but very few restrictions additionally within the tier we're in. So the hit for hospitality is the fact that households can't mix with other households inside. So I suspect if this had happened in the height of summer, it wouldn't be quite such an issue, because you can still meet as a group of 6 outside, and that's retained. But inside, only households cannot meet with other households. They just need to go to themselves. So that will have an impact on hospitality where friends of groups of 6 would have gathered previously, and that's the main hit. However, when you move on, all other business remains open, and all other activity basically remains unchanged and open. If you moved to the higher tier as a minimum, it'd be likely that all pubs that serve alcohol and particularly serve alcohol would need to close. There would be hits on restaurants as well, that people would not be allowed to go out basically. So it's very unlikely there'd be any customer in those areas. And it would start to impact on people's jobs, where they can only go, if they're in particularly high, important areas. So business would start to close down, workplaces would start to close down. It would be a very unfortunate place to be, and it's not unlikely we might end up there, but I think the chances of doing so are minimised by what we're doing at the moment, by moving earlier into the much less severe level 2 restrictions.
Okay, Dick, if I may just add something, because a lot of this here is also about consensus. What the Chief Constable and I were talking about is, some people might say, therefore, we'll go as a group and we'll all stand in the smoking area outside the pub, cheek by jowl, very close to each other, breathing in each other, but we're now outside and we're a group of 6, and that'll be okay. People can comply with the word, but they need to comply with the spirit. We've just got to be sensible. It is one thing to pass somebody by in the street, but if you want to stand within 1 foot of each other for half an hour while you're having a few pints of beer, or hours while you're having pints of beer, the protection level of being outside will be massively reduced because you're so close to the people you're talking to. Okay, so just think about it.
Okay, from Councillor Scaldis and Mike, what is the situation with gyms and swimming pools?
They stay open.
It really, there really is. Well, they stay open, but you can't mix with other households there. So you have to stay with your family in the gym or in this. But basically, everything stays open that is already open under the next level.
John, I think I'll pass this initially to you, Councillor Plummer. I've been asked if there's anything can be done around enforcement, particularly in shops, etc. There are a lot of people with no mask and no lanyards.
So I will pass it over to Mike, because it's your job, Mike. I think last week in our meeting with the council leaders, somebody made a very good suggestion that we ought to be thinking. We've not been able to do anything about it yet. We should be thinking about almost creating a rating mechanism, a benchmark, a kite mark thing, where shops get rated for the quality of the compliance regimes they create. And it was noted that a lot of the places that had very strict disciplines 2 months ago have rather let those slip. So, Mike, what do you think we can do? And again, it's work that you're going to be doing with the police and the environmental health officers.
So I think that there's 2 things: there's perception and there's epidemiology. I think that the reality is that the wearing of masks is very, very marginal in this, but it creates a very important message. What the danger of wearing masks is people go within 2 meters of each other. If people stay out of the 2 meter thing, and that is the key. If you stay out of 2 meter thing, you're not going to infect someone else, and they're not going to infect you. When we do our test and trace service, if you phone somebody up and you say you've been with somebody, were you within 2 meters? If they say no, then we say, thank you very much, I'm sorry to have troubled you. If you're within 2 meters, you're very likely to end up self-isolating. So the 2 meters distance is really, really important. Masks help because they stop you from infecting the other person, but what's critical is that wearing masks doesn't obviate the need for the 2 meters, which remains crucial. Shops need to push the 2 meters very hard. They need to be seen to be pushing the mask thing as well. I can understand why some of them are frightened. The other issue is there are a number of people who genuinely and legitimately can't wear masks, and it's very difficult to be clear exactly who they are and how to identify them. But certainly if there are obvious persistent offenders, then the shop should try and intervene, and should they not, they should try and get police. And we want to increase the police presence. We want to help compliance by making premises know that it's not unlikely the policeman's going to turn up at any time and just walk around.
Okay, just bear with me a minute. Something's happened, Joanna, that you've taken one off. Let me just find it.
It wasn't me, I'm afraid.
Okay, so
I think it's because the voting, Councillor Madden, when people are voting, they're moving around, they're moving up the list.
okay, I found the original one. So From Councillor Bedford, and others have raised the clarification, please. If you're at home and a tradesperson comes to your house, as example, hairdresser wears a mask and cuts your hair, is this allowed as it is a person from a separate household, yet they are doing a job? Can you comment, please, Mike?
Yes, you could. So everyone can go about their work. Obviously, we'd expect the hairdressing service to be COVID safe, but plumbers, nail technicians, house cleaners, everybody can continue with their work in a COVID safe way and can do that. If they're mobile, they can do it in a mobile way.
You'll want to make sure that they are sanitising when they come into your house, Mike.
Yes, in a COVID safe way, yeah.
I found that I was going to ask that joined up, that still sticks with the house. With Jackson, people who come to my house to carry out essential work, as you said, presume are allowed, but he says also I have an office at home and have visitors in that connection, usually one at a time.
So if it's your business, yes.
Okay.
Keep them at 2 metres.
If possible, yes. It's got to be COVID safe, yes. Yes, but 2 metres they can come in, yes.
Councillor Schrader has asked a question, but it has been answered about how long do we think we will be under tier 2, and it does come under review, as you said, every 4 weeks.
Yes, it's under review every 4 weeks, Dick, and it's, it's the question everybody asks: how long have we got to put up with this for? And I'd love to say if we do this, we'll be out of it in 3 months. But the moment you give any target date, then if we don't make it, it's failure. So, as Mike and I have repeatedly said, we will be in it as short a time as the behaviour of the people of Essex enables us to be in it. The better we can all comply, the better we can foster a culture where compliance is good and cool, then the quicker we will get out of this.
And I think I must add as well, we will be out of it quicker than we would have been had we waited for the Secretary of State to put us in it in a few weeks. There's no doubt about that.
Okay. Question from Councillor Burton Sampson, John. There's been a significant challenge from residents as to why Southend and Thurrock have been allowed to remain in tier 1 when the rest of Essex is moved to tier 2. Apart from them being unitary, what other decisions led to this being allowed, given that they are going to be sandwiched between large areas who are in tier 2?
Now, and another excellent question, thank you. And let's just remember that while we have boundaries with Southend and Thurrock, we have boundaries with Suffolk, Cambridgeshire and Hertfordshire. But actually Hertfordshire in particular has higher rates than in parts of Essex. So it is interesting. I talked with both the portfolio holders in Southend and Thurrock, and Mike talked with our directors of public health. It is a statement of fact that last Friday, the then Director of Public Health and the portfolio holder expected to be able to support us. I always respect the decisions of another local authority. I must conclude that other voices in Southend concluded not. Thurrock were more fundamentally opposed to it. The Director of Public Health was, and the portfolio holder. The Director of Public Health has tried to tell us that we're only going up because we've got more tests. But if you remember Mike's statistic earlier, and I'm just going to enlarge on it. If you go back to the end of July, positive rate on tests was about 0.6%. When Mike came to me last week, or maybe it was earlier in that week, the success rate, the positive rate in tests was 5.2%. Today he's reported to you that it is 6.7%. So it's gone up tenfold. So I have no doubt that that argument is wrong. Thurrock are now completely in an enclave with London on one side and Essex on the other. I fully respect the decision of their council. They will do as they wish to do. But just remember, we've got boundaries on all sides. If you want to go and stay with friends and relatives in Suffolk or Hertfordshire or Cambridge or Southend or Thurrock, you can. I would just urge you, be sensible. This is what this is all about. A behaviour of common sense and not going mad because you happen to have stepped 2 feet over the county border will be great. will be very, very sad if the people of Essex are seen to invade these other places just to get away from our rules. Mike?
So I absolutely agree that the rules apply to the people in the area, not to the geography of the area. So the high alert level means that people could not go and visit other families in those other areas, and that's absolutely critical. And it's really important, but we're very difficult to enforce. And I think there is a real danger that that places like Thurrock are going to be swamped with people from London, people from South Essex who choose to go there because they can mix. But they shouldn't be doing so, because that is not appropriate within the rules.
Okay, Mike, I want you to clarify that the rules don't stop people doing it. It is the spirit of the rules.
No, I think the rules. I think the rules actually say you can't mix with other households out of your area. But we can check that and get back.
You need to clarify that for me, please, as well.
Paul Turner is on the line, John. I think he wants to come in on that.
Says Paul, for the benefit of other people, can you introduce who you are, please, Paul?
Yeah, hi, I'm the County Council's Director of Legal, basically. So the rules about gatherings are applied to gatherings that take place in Essex, and also to gatherings that people who live in Essex participate in elsewhere. So if you go to the pub in Ipswich, you would need to not mix with other households, for example.
That's Paul, thank you. That's a piece of education for me here. Say to the officers who are listening, can we clarify that in the leaflet, please?
John and Mike, for your benefit, we have just over 30 minutes. We have 62 questions still. So I'm just letting you know, for information. Next one is from Councillor Harris. You've touched on it, John. It's about regarding ensuring community public compliance, and basically asking, have we enough staff for this task? But I assume you've covered that with Chief Constable. Is there any comment you want to make on that? Brief comment.
I'm waiting to receive the detailed plan, Mike.
Yes, so actually, I think that's important, but the reality is, unless people choose to do it, it's not going to work. People need to choose to want, well, not to want to, but choose to work from home, choose to adhere to the household restrictions. Unless we do that, we're going to fail. We can't comply. We can't enforce our way into this. It's because people, how we can enforce households mixing. I think we really, really got to win hearts and minds on this, and that's my real concern and worry.
Okay, Mike, a question from Councillor Moore. A data query, please. Are university students living away from home and testing positive, not yet registered with GPs on campus, now being included as positive cases in the relevant university locations? No. So this has had an impact. It's had a net impact of about 300 cases, which is slightly under 10% of the total cases in Essex since the beginning of the year. It is now being corrected, but up until now it hasn't been corrected. So the figures in Essex, it's something like 480 Essex addresses were belonging to students who were actually in university, and conversely, there was 150 or something students elsewhere who are actually Essex addresses. So the net difference is about 300 deficit. So we are actually got 300 less cases than we had originally thought. But we only found that out a couple of days ago. Well, literally today, actually. Okay, Councillor Dean, under what worsened circumstances would either Tier 3 or total lockdown circuit breaker be requested? John.
The circuit breaker would never be in our gift to request. That can only be done on a national basis. I would believe Mike, you will correct me. And Mike would argue from a medical scientific point of view, he can see the merit of a circuit breaker provided it is of suitable length. So from my perspective, a suitable length, which would need to mean at least 2 weeks, but probably 3 or 4, feels very dangerous for the economy. In terms of Tier 3 being requested, it's a hypothetical question, but I'd have to say to you, I just don't want to get there. And I don't see a situation, Dick, where I'd request it. I mean, it's very hard pushed. It's much more likely to be a mutual conclusion with government that we have no alternative but to go. But I wouldn't want to say this number or that number, whatever. As much says, if we do these things well, and if we get hearts and minds, it is not a question I need to answer.
So my view on this, and it would be different than anyone else. So I think I need to go and really study the SAGE report and what the additional added value to each different element within the tier 3 is. At the moment, I'm with Councillor Spence. I would not want to do it, absolutely not want to do it. I think the question is, if we start to really turn the curve in Essex, and you can see it from the data, and then we stall, what are we going to do? And I think that if literally just a couple of weeks in tier 3 would turn that curve. So I think that that's probably the last thing people want to hear. But actually, there may be a further debate up the line that we need to have about this. Now, I'm absolutely not advocating, yes, we should go to tier 3 because it is very harmful. But what we do need to do is get on top of this disease and manage it somehow. And if we find, for whatever reason, it may be that the virus gets more aggressive, it may be that people don't comply with what we're doing. If we find ourselves in that situation, we need to look carefully at the evidence of what works and define what more might we be asked the people of Essex to do. And it may be that we can just find marginal things around that, or maybe we'd have to and try and get them to do it voluntarily. I think that would be my first approach. If we can't manage that, then we may have to think of different options available to us.
I could say more, but we've got loads of questions.
Yeah, we've got some financial ones again. I'm not going to answer them. You've answered them as such, but they raise points about what the money be used for moving up. In the tier, being in tier 2, and what would it be used for? And then about, is there any support for local businesses as a result of this change? I think you've covered that generally. I'd say to everyone, the financial areas, John and Mike, or John in particular, has answered many of these areas. So if there's additional points, we'll answer them after this, because I need so many questions I need to try and get through. Just information, John, Councillor Barber, the main questions I've received are support for hospitality, indicators we need to go back to tier 1, and a longer term exit plan, i.e. local test and trace. Councillor Durham asks, can you clarify what this means for visits to family members in care homes, please?
So in terms of the indicators, we've answered the long-term plan. I think we've answered that. On the financial side, I said earlier, we only found out in the last 24 hours that we're getting a modest sum of money. That will only be enough to defray the expenses we're incurring. And there isn't just enough there to make any meaningful contribution to businesses. On care homes, Mike, what's the latest?
Okay, so the position is that if you go to alert level 2, then the visits to care homes are restricted to those who are terminal and in extreme circumstances. I think that, first of all, that is not a terribly evidence-based thing according to SAGE. And secondly, it's not something that I would personally adhere to. So we've been working with the Department of Health, and the lead for care homes in the Department of Health has been working on this anyway, because we're not the only people to say it. And I understand there's something today being considered for putting through for political consideration next week, which would allow somewhat more latitude on this. Unfortunately, the timing isn't quite right. I can't see why, now that this thing has got sort of clinical approval, scientific approval, that it wouldn't get political approval, because it's a real win-win. So I would hope that, while sadly for the next few days we would have to adhere to the guidance and care home visits will not be allowed, I would think in very short order we should have a different response to that, hopefully within a week.
Okay, Dick, might be need to keep the answer short.
Okay, so Councillor Tunbridge, this has been covered in relation to the point you make about decision to go up or down. Obviously, it's been reviewed every 4 weeks, and that will be engagement with the Secretary of State. Councillor Tattersley said, should school staff and parents collecting their child wear a mask, Mike? They
should certainly social distance. We can't compel them to wear a mask, but they should definitely stay 2 meters apart from each other.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reid asks, wouldn't a circuit breaker allow us to effect a more efficient track and trace system, allow our hospitals to cope more effectively?
So yes, in short, yes. Short answer, yes. but it's not. There isn't one planned.
And Mike recommends the politicians have to make the difficult decisions. But I just can't see a situation where a circuit breaker could happen other than nationally.
No, you can't do it locally.
Okay, just bear with me because the screen has jumped and I've lost the second part of that. So a question from Councillor Highland. Who district was consulted before the decision to seek tier shift, John?
Sorry, I didn't hear the start of that.
Who at district was consulted before a decision to seek tier shift?
So we consulted all the district, borough and city council leaders, and I believe that the chief executives were also consulted in that process. This was a fast moving situation, and I don't know what individual leaders were then able to do. I certainly know that in some district councils there were briefings for all councillors.
Okay, bear with me.
I would just say while you're looking, Dick, this remarkable coalition, every district, borough, city, county council, every political leader and every leader of the opposition, all the parties in the county council, was quite remarkable.
Councillor Barker, what is the average age of people being hospitalised? Mike?
I don't know. I imagine they're an older group, but I don't know the average age.
Councillor Schrader, many residents have made the point about how the COVID figures stack up against suicide and deaths caused by other things such as missed cancer treatments. Are we able to address that very legitimate concern? I know, John, you'll want to say initially.
I will indeed, because the levels of suicide in Essex before COVID came along, any level is unacceptable, but we are high by national standards. We have an average death rate across the years in Essex. They're going to have a national average, and 3 or 4 districts are in the country, and we've been trying to explore that. There is much noise about the level of suicide exploding across the county. I've not yet been able to find any evidence of it. I've asked Mike to formally write to the coroner's office and to the police for any data they have about suspected suicide situations since lockdown in March, so that we can get to the facts of this. Of course, mental illness, we know it's increasing and it's a massive piece. And again, I'll say, by doing this now, by avoiding tier 3 and by being in tier 2 for a shorter period, we hope to reduce the impact on mental illness. We certainly know that during lockdown earlier this year, and I could prove this statistically, Mike, you and I could, significant numbers of deaths out of hospital in the community that one must assume might not have happened had people gone to hospital. So that's the issue, and I've already pointed to the backlog of cancer care across in parts of the county, and there will be other conditions.
So I think the only thing I would add is that at the moment, while the deaths from coronavirus are correctly low, the rates are going up very quickly. So if we're looking at an exponential rate, they will double and then double and then double and then double. So it may well be they're compatible with the death rates from some of those things now, but in a month they won't be.
And as I say, so will the levels of people dying from other conditions because they can't get the hospital treatment.
Okay, from Councillor Hudson, Mike has made it plain that mixing of families indoors is the greatest risk. Surely the greater mixing of family members occurs in our schools. Should the schools now shut down for an extended half-term holiday?
So there are 2 things. First of all, that schools are actually COVID secure in an odd way because they have bubbles, but they are COVID secure. So there shouldn't be that transmission, but we are aware that we've had a couple of outbreaks in schools that are quite significant. I think the second thing is this is all about margins. So as you see from my slides, I'm scraping around to find enough things that reduce the R value by 0.1, 0.2, enough to get below that critical level of R value of 1. And it's about margins. So the choice has to be made. So there's a strong view that we need to keep schools open. It's really important. Closing schools would impact on the R value, no question, but it would have a very huge amount of negative impacts both on the workforce more generally and on the children themselves, both their education and their sort of their well-being. So the plan is to keep schools open as much as we possibly can. To do that, we then have to be as robust as possible in other areas. So the reason we have to restrict the households is because there's a high risk just within those households, and by doing so we can reduce the R value by probably about 0.15. That would be the median value that I've fed it into our calculations, and in doing so that gives the best chance of along with working from home of turning the curve. Yes, if we close the schools that would help as well, but that is not something that is being politically considered and would be a very, very late thing that would happen in the second wave.
Okay, moving on, Councillor Henderson, as we are all aware, our voluntary groups are a lifeline to a number of vulnerable residents living in our communities. I'm being contacted with requests from those groups asking what activities and services they can and cannot continue to deliver in their community centres. Would it be possible to provide information in simple terms to the voluntary sector to enable them to continue in providing this essential local support?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely. Sorry.
So a great range of activities can continue. The leaflet will give some high-level information, but we are trying to compile a list of all the questions you may possibly need answered. We will aim to give as much detailed information, Councillor Henderson, as we can. There's buckets of this. I got asked about an hour before the start of this, can a child's toddler, a kind of toddler ballet class where the company children continue, which I think the answer may be no, Mike, but a child's ballet class where the mums and dads are excluded, is a different matter. So, you know, it's really quite levels of detail we're going to have to work here, Mike.
Yes, yes. I'm broadly speaking, though, I think most things probably can continue. I think I take it from that position, but then we can look at what might be the exceptions.
Okay, I have a question from a council. I won't name them because it's regarding their member of the family. My mother is in Southend Hospital. I live in Rochford. Can I still visit her?
Yes.
Okay. Just bear with me a minute. A few questions. Councillor Whitbread, Holly Whitbread, that is. Questions from residents. What are childcare bubbles for under 14 specifically? For example, can two working parents have a family member to watch their 2-year-old? That's the first point. How many people are allowed in a support bubble when visiting? And the third point is one local resident runs flower classes indoors and is wondering whether she will have to cancel them now she is usually attendees from mixed households.
So, Mike, the answer to questions 1 and 3 is yes, they can still run in their flower class, and yes, the working parents can have a family member look after their 2-year-old. Can you out on the size of the bubbles, please?
So that's a really, again, interesting one. My understanding is it will remain 6. So that means that, like, if it's a single person living alone, they can go and with another family up to about 5. I think it can only be up to 5. I think beyond that it's problematic. And if you have sort of a family of 3, you could go with another family of 3, assuming that one of them is a 1-parent household. But I think the rule of 6 is quite immutable on this.
There is a common sense here, please, Mike. So I got contacted by a family with 4 children aged under 10. And does that mean we cannot visit their grandmother?
It actually, in theory, under the current circumstances, you can't. Under the medium run, you can't. But I think you know, it would be common sense. You could have that person in a bubble. But that's not an issue of level 2.
John and Mike, I'm going to try and keep going through these quickly now. So can you bear that in mind? Because we've still got many questions. And then from Councillor Callaghan, at what point are we expecting to need to apply for the London Nightingale Hospital to be reopened due to pressure on ICU beds in Essex, Mike?
I don't think we'll get to that stage. It'd be a real failure if we did.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bedford, as you have said, we need the police to enforce. Can we employ civil civil enforcement officers at local district county level that would reduce the burden on our police services, John?
Well, the government money for this went to the district borough council, so please do what you need to with your share of that resource, I think. I'm right, Mike, that went to the district and borough council.
Yeah, and the police, yeah.
From Councillor Sheldon, will there be any specific communications on childcare, particularly grandparents? Well,
Yes.
Look after. Sure, I'm just going through as quick as I can.
So the childcare one, we're just trying to word it in language that people understand, because when the government guidelines talk about wraparound childcare, I'm afraid people don't understand what that means.
Okay. Councillor Reid says it has been reported in the media that we need to have some dedicated care homes for post-COVID parents to be discharged into from hospitals. How are we in Essex providing this facility?
Yeah, so we have to have designated places, Councillor Reid. That's a requirement from the Department of Health. What happens there is we work out where we think we have facilities. There's a list of criteria about what would make them suitable. They will then be inspected by the CQC to see that they are suitable. This is all about their power to keep people in isolation away from other residents and all that sort of stuff. They will then be done. So we're actually doing, I think, our first inspection as a trial run is at the back end of this week or early next, but that's what those designated places are. They will be the care homes that can guarantee the high levels of care and the ability to keep those patients totally isolated. We will consider whether we ever need to reopen the How Green facility, but at this stage that is not envisaged.
Okay, sorry about this, but obviously the screen keeps jumping around when people are taking questions off. So, Councillor Iono, you mitigate the spread of COVID-19 virus in hospitals located in Southend and Basildon when residents from Rochford District may need to visit or be admitted into the hospitals?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. I'm really sorry.
I think it's more for the hospital, but how will you mitigate the spread of COVID-19 virus in hospitals located in Southend and Basildon when residents from Rochford District may need to visit or be admitted into hospitals?
So, it is the hospitals to become, for their job to become COVID secure, and we need to work with them on it. And in fairness, I think they probably need to sort of reconsider some of those positions at the moment. And learn from what's going on. But yeah, it's for the hospitals to do it.
Councillor, I think it's Bamford. What is the current position with testing residents? Sorry, what is the current position with testing? Residents are finding it difficult in tracing what will happen. What will happen when more people wanting tests? Surely this is key to stopping the virus.
Yeah, absolutely, and it is a real problem that the government are increasing their capacity for testing, but I don't think they're doing it at the pace in which the virus is spreading. So it is a real issue. It's a real problem. It's a national issue. That it's the lab capacity now that seems to be the rate limiting factor rather than the access to local services. We can only do test and trace on those people who've been tested. So all we can do is really keep encouraging people to give tests.
But you have confirmed to me that you have enough resource for the increased levels of tracing you're having to do, Mike, and you know from me that you will have access to any additional resource you require. It is
thank you.
That we up that track and trace rate. We've got an excellent organisation. I promise you, it won't fail to get to the levels we're asking of them because of the lack of resource. Whatever resource he needs.
No pressure there. Yeah.
With me a minute, one that I've lost a particular councillor. Councillor Henderson, if Essex has as suggested a first-class test and track system in place, why is the pandemic on the increase in spreading across Essex?
because the test and trace is only one small element of it. The ability of the test and trace, to really be effective, it only really cuts in when the R values are quite low, and you have to bear in mind, even at the best, only about 30% of people who are infectious are actually coming forward and having tests and are then self-isolating. So tracing and tracking people who have already got the infection is not going to turn this one around. We need to do much more than that. We need to get many more people to come forward and test to have that to happen. And we have to do other ways to stop them getting infected.
So we need to increase the testing capacity at the labs. That's a national government job. We then want to make sure the testing units are in the right places in Essex. Mike's been working very hard on that, with universities, Epping Forest and so on. Then we need to get people to be much better at admitting that they might need a test if they're feeling a bit symptomatic, so that we get a higher ratio of people into the place. And doing that, then we have to get them to be as open as they can be about telling us who their contacts were. The more people who use the NHS app, of course, the more objective information we'll have. And then have confidence that Mike's tracing operation will then get to those people. We then have to persuade them to isolate. So there's a whole lot of steps in the piece, Councillor Henderson, but it will be an important element.
So, Councillor Hazel, can you explain why the mixing of households will greatly reduce the R number, Mike?
It won't greatly reduce the R number. I have to be clear, it'll reduce it at the margin. So we're talking about an R number at the moment, about 1.27. The impact of the household thing will reduce it by between 0.1 and 0.2. So the figure we're using is 0.15 in our calculations. So they're all quite marginal changes. All we have to do is push it from 1.29 to 0.99, and we're going in the right direction. And all these things are really challenging to do. So it doesn't have a huge impact, but it has enough impact if we get it done properly to turn the curve. That's all you need to do. So that and work, but it's got to be done with working from home optimally, because the two of them together are the interventions that will get Essex out of this hole. Otherwise, things will go in the wrong direction.
Okay, we've had a request about will these slides be shared with those on this, Mike, and I assume that will be the case.
Yeah, sure.
Okay,
Please.
so from Councillor Rose, Mike, where in your opinion is the virus being generated from in Essex? Is there a suspected main cause? No,
it's everywhere. It's just everywhere. It's in the community. It's spreading in the community. Therefore, it's getting to the hospital. It's getting to the schools. It's getting to the hospitality. It's going between families. It's everywhere.
And that's actually, Dick, what makes it so difficult. You've got community spread. Can't point to any major things. Yeah, there's a couple of schools shut, but not masses. Care homes are pretty well isolated. They're not seeing there. So, as Mike says, it is widespread community spread.
Okay, from Councillor Rajesh, by residents, if the places of worship or public places, have you any further restrictions due to Essex moving on to Tier 2?
No. They stay open, Mike, don't they? The places of worship stay open.
Yes.
I'm going through these. Councillor Callaghan, I'm not ignoring your question, the one you asked for Kerry Smith, but it seems to have jumped off the screen. So if you want to bang it on again, try and pick it up. There's lots of individual questions. We've covered that.
You're doing a wonderful job, Dick.
The number of questions is running away from him.
Yeah, we've had that. So that.
Councillor Madden,
Yes.
Councillor Callaghan's question is still there.
So can you read it, Joanna?
Can you read it out, Joanna, please?
Of course, yeah. Will there be extra funding available for community hubs?
So we need to set up the community hubs again. We have got some resources if required for them. Yes. I mean, I'm really hoping we won't have to get into a shielding, because I mean that's another thing. If we do this now, the chances of us winding up having to do shielding again is less, because we're keeping the virus level down within the wider population. and there isn't an association at the moment between going up to the high alert level and shielding.
And the leaflet will be very clear in saying that people who wear shielding do not have to. They can lead ordinary lives as long as they obey the rules and be particularly cautious about the social distancing.
Correct.
Okay. We have 10 minutes left, John, so I'm going to flick through these as quick as I can, as many have been answered. But next question, Councillor Harris. Is the youth service going to be told to stop the current ability to meet in small groups? He says, think 15, he thinks, Mike.
I'll have to check that up and get back to you, I'm afraid.
Okay. So, John, if you want to say a few words in the sense, what I'm just going to run through this and check and find out if this is.
Do you know how many councillors we've had on the webinar during the time?
There's 117 on the bottom, the little heads, but they won't be councillors.
At its peak, we had about 150.
Well, that's terrific. Thank you very much. I realise that most of you only heard about this. Well, we only started organising it on Wednesday, and I'm grateful to Councillor Edwards of Harlow, I think it was, whose original suggestion it was, backed up by the members of the Scrutiny Committee, the Hostile Scrutiny Committee. And it's been a very valuable exercise from us. As you've heard, I've learned some things as we've gone along. You have given up the best part of an hour and a half of your time on a Friday afternoon. Joanna, thanks again to you. Dick, you've done a wonderful job, my dear friend. You're probably close to a nervous breakdown yourself after that. Mike is going off on a week's leave and a week's very cautious leave, pretty well deserved. This will continue undiminished. We will get this leaflet to the printers, I hope, tonight, as a start being published on Monday, and we'll go across. It will not answer every question. You can hear that. So many of these questions are points of particular detail and have different tweaks, but we are aiming to create the directory of questions, every question you might possibly ask. So please, Joanna, make sure we get all those questions across to the big compendium we're compiling. I want the councils of Essex as a whole to be judged by the way in which we gave the residents the information they required and minimised the confusion. Nick, have you got one last one you want to do?
No, I've been answered, and just want to, because I was checking these, can you confirm, Joanna or John, that everyone who's asked a question, because we're going to have these, if we haven't answered them, when we go back through it, we will. Is that right? Joanna?
You broke up a bit, Dick.
Yes, so all questions, we've got a copy of all of the questions, and we'll make sure that they're all pulled together. This is on YouTube, and we will be making that link available as well. So the presentation slides, the briefing presentation, and the questions will all be available to all Essex members, district, borough, city, and county.
Can I ask something, please, if that's okay? So it's to members, please, can you help us? Can you help us to get these messages across, particularly to your to the working from home message, and particularly the household not mixing message, and the fact that if we do it now, we'll be in for a much shorter time and it'll be much easier for everyone, because really they're the messages we need to get out to people. I'm worried at the moment that we're not getting them, so please, can you help us in this endeavour? Your support is critical and your help is critical, please.
Absolutely. It is the behaviour of our residents that will determine that we don't go into tier 3. It's the behaviour of our residents that will enable us to get back to tier 2. Everyone, please understand that we can do lots of things. This is down to the behaviour of our residents, and you're wonderful advocates to do that. You're community leaders, and I'm so grateful to you for attending. I hope you found it valuable. And I think with that, I will say a very good afternoon to you. May you have a peaceful and healthy weekend.
Thank you. We'll now close the meeting.